Have you ever wondered why something as simple as salt holds so much significance in the Bible? You might not realize it, but salt goes far beyond being just a seasoning. What many don't know is that it carries a hidden power, a spiritual force capable of changing lives. Surprising, isn't it? In this video, you will discover how salt, the same kind you have in your kitchen, is used as a true spiritual weapon. Imagine being able to purify your home, protect your family, and even break curses, all with the power of God manifested through salt. Sounds too good to be true? Stay with me until the end, because I'm going to show you how this is possible and what the Bible truly reveals about salt. Get ready to uncover secrets that could transform your life. Salt, often underestimated in its simplicity, carries a spiritual power that transcends the physical. In the Bible, it is not just a seasoning, but a powerful spiritual tool used to break curses and open doors to God's blessings. Imagine, for instance, a family facing endless challenges. By using salt as a symbol of God's power in their prayers, they can experience a significant change, as salt acts as a spiritual catalyst, bringing divine purity into their lives. Moreover, salt is seen as an agent of spiritual transformation. When a home is blessed with salt, it is believed to become a refuge against evil forces. This is because salt, at its core, represents an unbreakable covenant with God's power, acting as a spiritual barrier against any negativity. A practical example: one can use salt in prayer rituals, sprinkling a bit in the corners of the house to purify the space and invite the Lord's blessings. Even more intriguing is salt's role in the release of abundant blessings. In the Bible, it is often used in contexts where faith is translated into concrete actions, such as in sacrifices offered to God. Understanding salt as a spiritual weapon encourages believers to incorporate this element into their faith practices, whether in daily prayers or moments of consecration. The simple act of adding salt to a prayer can serve as a powerful reminder of the commitment to God's power, a tangible symbol of faith. And of course, using salt also teaches us the importance of active faith. When used in rituals or prayers, it is not the salt itself that holds the power, but the power of God manifested through this act of faith. Thus, salt becomes a tool that facilitates connection with the divine, a means by which believers can align themselves with the spiritual promises God has already prepared for them. And speaking of divine promises, salt is just the beginning of this spiritual journey. Since the beginning of time, salt has held a defined purpose in God's creation. In Genesis, salt is an essential part of God's work, not just as a natural element, but as a symbol with spiritual significance. It's fascinating to think that as God shaped the world, He also appointed salt to be a channel of His power. Throughout biblical history, we see salt being used in sacred covenants, highlighting its importance as an element that strengthens the bond between humanity and the power of God. Salt in creation carries a profound and lasting meaning. It is not merely a substance to flavor food, but a tangible manifestation of the purity and preservation that God desires for His creation. Recognizing salt as part of divine creation, we realize it is more than a natural resource. It is a spiritual weapon designed to maintain order and holiness in the world. Imagine, for example, how salt could be used in family rituals, reinforcing the purity and protection of the home, serving as a true shield against evil. Indeed, the creation of salt points to its use as a preserving agent, something that goes beyond the physical and reaches the spiritual. In the Bible, it is used to preserve the sanctity of covenants, ensuring that the promises made to God remain steadfast. It is as if salt acts as a divine seal, a spiritual guarantee that what is consecrated to God will be preserved by His mighty hand. A practical example could be using salt in the consecration of objects, or even in the spiritual protection of individuals, ensuring that they are always under God's watchful care. Ultimately, when we reflect on the creation of salt, we understand that it was intentionally placed by God in the world to be a symbol of His power and His constant presence. Therefore, salt is not just a mineral. It is a constant reminder of divine care and the spiritual power available to all who believe. And just as salt has an eternal purpose, other elements of creation also hold their divine missions. In God's creation, each element has a specific purpose, and salt, along with fire and water, plays a crucial role in spiritual preservation and purification. Salt, in particular, is often seen as an agent of purification, capable of removing impurities and protecting what is sacred. Think of it as a spiritual shield, a resource designated by God to maintain the purity of the soul and the environment. The use of salt in biblical rituals, such as in sacrificial offerings, illustrates its importance as a tool to uphold the covenant between humanity and the power of God. Fire, on the other hand, is another element with a clearly defined spiritual purpose. It is frequently associated with intense purification and the divine presence, as seen in the episode of the burning bush in Exodus. While fire consumes, salt preserves, creating a divine balance between the destruction of evil and the protection of good. Together, fire, water, and salt form a powerful trio that acts in spiritual transformation. A simple example would be using fire to burn away spiritual evil, followed by using salt to ensure blessings are preserved, bringing divine harmony to the environment. Water, by contrast, symbolizes life and purification, used in baptism and other sacred rituals. Just as salt purifies, water renews, cleansing the body and soul from impurities. In many instances in the Bible, salt is added to water to amplify its purifying power, as in the episode where Elisha purifies the waters of Jericho. This act symbolizes the combination of God's power with the elements He created, showing how everything in creation has a specific role in the divine plan. A practical example would be adding a pinch of salt to water used in prayers, enhancing spiritual cleansing. Therefore, when considering the purpose of these elements, it becomes clear that each was created with a spiritual mission in mind. Salt, as part of this balance, not only preserves but also purifies, acting as a spiritual weapon among other elements designated by God. This concept of purpose expands even further as we explore how salt can be used in spiritual warfare. Salt, beyond its purifying and preserving functions, is also a powerful weapon in spiritual warfare. Since biblical times, it has been used to protect, cleanse, and even curse what is impure. When someone faces spiritual battles, using salt in their prayers and rituals can be a way to invoke God's power to drive away evil. For instance, by sprinkling salt around their home, a believer can create a spiritual barrier that prevents the entry of negative forces, using salt as a tool of divine defense. In biblical accounts, we see salt being used to establish sacred covenants, such as the covenant of salt mentioned in the scriptures. These covenants are seen as unbreakable, symbolizing the faithfulness and permanence of the relationship between God and His people. When salt is used in this context, it becomes a spiritual weapon that strengthens the bond with the divine, ensuring that God's promises are fulfilled. An example would be using salt in consecration ceremonies, where it serves to seal the alliance between the believer and the power of God. Moreover, salt has also been used to curse and purify land that had been tainted by evil. When Elisha cast salt into the bitter waters of Jericho, he wasn't just purifying the water, he was breaking a curse, using salt as a tool of spiritual liberation. This shows us that salt not only protects, but also has the power to transform adverse situations into blessings, dispelling the evil that tries to take root. A practical example would be using salt in spiritual cleansing rituals to purify and protect places that might be under negative influence. Therefore, salt in spiritual warfare is more than just a simple element. It is a powerful weapon that can be used to establish, protect, and purify, ensuring that God's power prevails in any spiritual battle. But the use of salt goes beyond spiritual warfare, extending also to biblical traditions and rituals that strengthen faith. Salt plays a central role in many biblical rituals and traditions, symbolizing purity, preservation, and the enduring covenant with God. From the purification of offerings to the consecration of sacred covenants, salt is an essential element that carries God's power in every grain. In the Bible, it is often mentioned in contexts where holiness and faithfulness are crucial, such as in the covenant of salt, representing an unbreakable agreement between God and his people. This covenant, sealed with salt, symbolizes the permanence and inviolability of the divine alliance. One of the most notable examples of the use of salt in biblical rituals is in the purification of offerings. Salt was added to grain offerings to symbolize the purity and preservation of gifts made to God. This act was not just a tradition, but an expression of the desire to keep the covenant with God pure and unblemished. Imagine a modern believer, when preparing a meal or offering something to God, adding a little salt not just as seasoning, but as a symbolic reminder of their covenant with God's power. This small gesture carries a profound spiritual meaning. The covenant of salt mentioned in the scriptures further emphasizes the importance of this element in biblical traditions. When salt is used to seal a covenant, it symbolizes the durability and strength of that commitment, which cannot be broken or corrupted. In biblical times, this covenant was seen as something sacred, an eternal commitment to God's power. Today, Christians can use salt in their consecration ceremonies or during moments of spiritual renewal, reaffirming their faithfulness and devotion to God, following traditions that have deep roots in the scriptures. These traditions and rituals demonstrate that salt is not just a physical element, but a powerful spiritual weapon that, when used with faith, can transform lives and strengthen the bond with God. By incorporating salt into their spiritual practices, believers are following a path laid out since ancient times, honoring biblical traditions that strengthen their connection with God's power. And this connection becomes even more practical when we learn to apply the use of salt in our daily spiritual lives. Now that we understand the power of salt and its role in biblical traditions, it's time to bring this knowledge into our everyday lives. The practical use of salt as a spiritual tool is simple yet powerful, and it can profoundly transform the spiritual life of those who use it. For example, during moments of prayer, salt can serve as a tangible way to seal your requests with God's power. Imagine, when praying for protection, sprinkling a little salt in the corners of your home, creating both a physical and spiritual barrier against evil. Additionally, salt can be used in personal purification rituals. Before an important moment of consecration or meditation, taking a bath with salt can symbolize cleansing and preparation to receive God's blessings. This simple and effective act connects the body and spirit to God's power, making the spiritual experience even deeper. Consider how a salt bath ritual could become a regular practice, helping to remove any spiritual impurities that might be hindering your faith journey. For those facing family curses or negative spiritual influences, using salt can be a practical and powerful solution. One example could be creating a circle of salt around your home or a specific place, declaring in God's name the protection of that space against any evil. This practice, rooted in biblical traditions, not only protects but also purifies, ensuring that God's power is always present and active. It's a way of making visible the faith that is invisible, an act of trust in God's power. Finally, salt can be incorporated into your daily prayers as a symbol of your covenant with God. Placing a bit of salt in a small container in your prayer space can serve as a constant reminder of God's power in your life, encouraging you to pray with more fervor and faith. This simple act can transform your spiritual routine, strengthening your connection with the divine, and ensuring that your prayers are always infused with God's power and grace. By understanding and applying these principles, you are prepared to dive even deeper into this spiritual knowledge. Now that you've discovered the spiritual power of salt, why not start applying it in your life? Don't just settle for knowing, put what you've learned into practice. Start using salt in your prayers, in your purification rituals, and in protecting your home. Ask yourself, what can I do today to strengthen my covenant with God's power? It might be consecrating your home, or even using salt to break curses that have affected your family. Don't put off until tomorrow what can transform your life today. And of course, if you want to keep learning about these powerful topics, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any content that can help you live a deeper and more purposeful spiritual life. Let's walk this journey of faith together.